Hello and welcome to the Studio Brushtail devlog, the very first devlog ever. My name is Toby Walker and I am a brand new game developer. I have worked in the InfoSec world for a long time. I've worked with computer science. I used to be a development operations specialist. So none of this stuff is too foreign to me, although I was never directly a software engineer. I've also done a lot of work with scripting, video editing, music editing, and sound design. So I think all of those things fit quite well for me to understand the Godot 4 engine, have a bit of intuition about how it should work, and have some specific knowledge that prepares me for using the software. Without further ado, let's talk about my journey. I wasn't looking to get into game development necessarily. I came across a Fireship video a while ago about Godot in 100 seconds, and I thought that's cool. Being a big Linux guy, a big open source guy, I thought that was cool, shelved it for later, filed it in the back of my brain. Fast forward to about a month ago, I came across Coco Code and his tutorial series about how to make a platformer game. I felt very compelled to jump in and do it, so I did. I knocked out the tutorial series. After that, I added music, sounds, and a bit of extra logic for doing things the way I wanted to. Cool Frog. So yeah, here's just some basic footage of what I made, and you can hear the sound design I did, which I had a lot of fun doing with the music and the sound effects. Nothing too special, obviously, but you know, I was learning, and I really do feel like I learned a lot with doing this. Yeah, and you can hear the music here that I designed. I made this myself, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I'm, proud of finishing something, put it that way. Next, I started watching a series of tutorials from Sable Spirit Studio, and he was doing an idle game, a clicker game. I got about the first third of the way through that. He really blew my mind with the way he was using classes, he explained inheritance, what a singleton script is, and the way he did his singletons was different than just the standard autoload that I was doing in my Godot projects. So I started learning a lot from watching his projects, and I decided I want to do a new project wherein I'm going to plan my infrastructure a bit more, to the point where I ended up over planning it, but we'll get to that in a minute. I also dabbled with a few other concepts, a few other ideas. I had a few people tell me you should make a Zelda style game. So I started messing around with this Gentoo penguin sprite, which is just a type of penguin. I love Gentoo penguins, they're my favorite, and I found this sprite of one that I loved. So I started messing around with that in a Zelda style game. I also tried putting it into a 3D world, and I really did like the way that looked. And I did think it was fun and cool, and I maybe will return to that concept of a game at some point. But I want to finish something. Jumping straight into 3D is not the fastest way for me to complete a project. I want to get something done so I can get some momentum going with my development. So instead of working on the 3D game or doing any more work with the Zelda style game that I had been working on, which, by the way, I followed a tutorial from DevWorm. He has a nice adventure RPG tutorial that gives you the basics for how a combat system could work, how you could do scene changes, and things like that. I recommend checking out DevWorm's channel, and also Sable Spirit Studio. He has some fantastic idle clicker tutorials, and he's a great teaching source. And then of course Coco Code, who I mentioned with the platform tutorial, so I would definitely recommend checking that out. I also knocked out a very basic Flappy Bird tutorial, and I from start to finish just built Flappy Bird. I typed it all myself. I didn't just copy the GitHub repo down just to make sure I could go through and understand how everything was working there. So I did a basic Flappy Bird, just used straight up Flappy Bird assets. Very boring, but made it work. Now I'm actually working on a game that I plan to release, I think on Steam is the plan. It was going to be itch.io originally, but the more time I put into it, the scope creep is starting to happen a bit, and I figure, you know what, I'm going to actually put it out there, sell it for $4 or $5, and just see what happens. And it also gives me a little bit more pressure to make the game a bit more interesting and deep than just something to show, hey, look, I can do it, but rather, hey, look, here's something that you might actually want to play. The working title was Realm Defense, but I think it's actually already taken. So it's Ultimate Pixel Realm Defense is like a name I was toying with, but it's probably just working title for now. Probably come up with something different at some point. But I decided to go through with this one and do it all from the ground up. I didn't follow a tutorial, I just started putting up I have an Obsidian Vault just for this game, so I started putting some ideas in there. Started chatting with ChatGPT 4o, bouncing ideas back and forth off of it, and using it to help myself plan the infrastructure of the code, the classes, and how the projectiles work, to the point where I actually ended up over planning a bit, because I built out this UI handler, I built out this game handler, and then now it turns out that I really would have been better off. The UI handler could have been my main overlay. They could have been the same thing. I said I have a UI handler and I have a main overlay, and they talk to each other. Those also talk to the game handler, and then that also talks to the towers, which also talks to the tower selection UI and the tower upgrade UI. The main overlay is still tied in with all this. Now I'm actually moving a lot of stuff out of the tower selection and tower upgrade. I may move it all out into the main overlay. So I put all this time into planning my UI handler and my game handler and my logic with these things. And now I'm realizing the best design approach is not always so obvious when you're in the planning phase. I do at least have some experience with DevOps, so I do understand how these operation and development cycles can work. Maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe I'm underthinking it, but in any case, I'm glad that I planned, because I've learned the pros and cons of planning. I think there's some use to it. There's also something to be said for just doing it. And that's part of what I really like about Sable Spirit Studios tutorial videos. He will build something functional, a prototype, and then when he goes to add a new layer of abstraction or a new layer to his code, he will refactor as necessary rather than trying to over-engineer things. Now, just talking about me, my name is Toby Walker. I have loved game design for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, I used to make paper games. I made this Battle Penguins game that would walk around and pick up guns like chess. When I was a kid, me and my friend Pat made a game. We ripped off the Final Fantasy VIII card game and made our own version with index cards. We started making our own rules and branching out with that. We used to do shadow runs with friends on the buses, like a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing, where you just make up an adventure with your friends or whatever, and you make up stats and stuff. We were just doing it in our heads, making things up. I've always had a passion for that. And then I have this part of me that loves coding, and I have this part of me that loves being creative, and I love music, I love sound design. So there's this intersection here. I've also done a lot of work with video editing, between coding, video editing, sound design, and my love for tech. It's a great way for me to challenge myself, and I've been learning a ton. That's one of the many reasons I'm getting into game development. So yeah, there we go. I think I pretty much covered everything here. I'll throw the footage up of what I've been working on. We can talk a bit about the tower defense game itself. I bought a few different asset packs of different pixel tower defense things. I end up editing them a lot myself. Honestly, the one I've mostly been using is not super advanced. It's pretty easy to edit myself, which is good because the aesthetic is something I can work with. Although there's a part of me that's wishing I had gone with something else. It's good enough for me to right now learn to program, learn to code, and design this game. It's a basic tower defense system. Originally, you were only able to pick specific spots to build your towers, and I had specific sprites in these locations where you would click and then you could build a tower at that spot. What I instead did, after showing the game to my nephew and getting some feedback, was convert the place where you can put a tower into a tile. And so I use it in my tile map, and then now I can actually tile out where the towers can be placed, and I have it all along the paths that the enemies travel. So you can essentially put your towers anywhere that's along the path. Having it all along the paths is enough where people can make a decision about where they want to place their tower and develop their own strategies around that while still not making it too Wild West. So anyways, that's a brand new thing. I just finished implementing that. Also, the zoom in and out with the mouse wheel so that you can see more and less of the map. I just finished implementing that 2 nights ago. And yeah, I'm constantly evolving it, coming up with new ideas. I'm trying to avoid too much scope creep. I do have an end goal in mind, but honestly, there's also a part of me that thinks this is still a boring tower defense game, so I'm trying to keep it a bit fresh. Basic premise: you put towers where you want. You can level your tower from 1 to 10 currently. 10 is the max cap level. There is the Frost Tower, the Cannonball Tower, and the Arrow Tower. Some enemies have armor values, and the Arrow ignores 20% of the armor value. The Cannonball ignores no armor, but it does not disappear when it collides. Like an arrow and a magic projectile, when they hit an enemy collision box, they queue free, aka they disappear, whereas the cannonball just shoots through enemies, so it more easily can hit multiple collision boxes. But it doesn't ignore armor, and it's the slowest shooting. It has the slowest fire rate even when it's maxed out. So that's the 3 towers I have currently. I also have some logic started for a fire tower and a burn. In the frost tower, the ice magic tower does have a 20 or 40% chance to inflict a frost effect, which slows enemies by half, I want to say. I have to check the code. And that lasts currently 7 seconds, although now with the larger maps, it's a bit strong, so I'm going to have to tamper that down a bit. Probably bring it down to 5 or 6 seconds that the enemies will be frosted for. But that just allows for a bit more strategy. You put a frost tower in front of, say, a cannonball or an arrow tower. And so then the other plans I have for more towers, the fire tower, the burn will not stack. However, I'm also going to make a poison tower, and the poison will stack. The burn will be a little bit stronger than the poison, but it doesn't stack. The poison does stack, and it will, of course, ignore armor. And there'll probably be poison immune enemies at some point. So that's what's going on with the different types of towers, levels 1 to 10. The price of the tower to upgrade goes up as you upgrade. It's based on an exponent of 1.35 or something like that. Whereas the stats increases are actually logarithmic. They approach a limit essentially, and then I can adjust the upper bounds of that limit. I think currently upgrading is a bit weak. I'm going to have to do some more balancing. I spent so much time balancing everything. Then I totally blew the map size up and made it so you could place towers everywhere, and now I have to rebalance everything all over again. And this is before I add a ton more enemies and a ton more towers, so of course there's going to be tons more balancing to do all over again. But I'm excited about having this ability to make a panning camera and have a map that can be bigger or smaller, especially with this pixel art aesthetic. I think it'll be cool if I can do like big giant maps at some point where you're maybe protecting from multiple angles and building your towers out across a very large map. So that's pretty much everything. What else do I have going on here with this? I talked about the frost. I implemented the health system, currently just 10 health, and then you die, it's game over. Currently it'll be levels, and an opening menu and such. I've started going through my sound and music. My music is going to be percussionless, 8-bit. I'm going for, it's actually Game Boy rendered, I believe, most of the music that I'm going with, which is a problem because I need to figure out how to render my own. I do want to compose some of my own tracks, but I need to have the MIDI output be similar to the tracks that I've purchased, because I did purchase some tracks that I really like, but I'm only going to use the ones that don't have percussion, because the towers are going to be making they're going to be making shooting sounds, so that's its own percussion. I want to make sure that, especially when I'm using all 8-bit sound, I don't want percussion and tower shooting to be blending together. If they're using the exact same sound forms, it's going to get confusing. So I'm going to do percussionless music mostly, I think, in the levels, and then maybe I'll do percussion music. The tracks that I really like to have percussion, I'll have to reserve those for other things. So yeah, this is getting pretty long. I've been rambling a bit, but this is for myself. This is just for me to get my thoughts out. And I've been bugging my friends with little videos of things I've been working on, just like sending them everything I've been doing. And so I thought, you know what? This gives them a break, and it gives me something more coherent to look back at in the future. So again, my name is Toby Walker. This is Studio Brushtail. I will probably be releasing more of these devlog videos in the future, and just other content around games, game design, and programming. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next devlog or whenever I do the next video. I did promise myself I'm not going to let myself obsess about editing these videos. So you get what you get. Take care, everybody.